Hello and welcome to the Fallen Podcast. I'm your host, Big Al, and boy, do we have a special one for you here today. Today in the studio with me is going to be none other than Command Sergeant Major Dylan Lemasters. We've got Clint Underwood, uh, and we've got Dr. Tim Murphy. So we're going to be talking specifically about post-traumatic stress disorders and just peeling the onion back. So without further ado, bringing these gentlemen in. Hey, Sergeant Major Lemasters, how's it going? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself real quick?
Good. How you doing, Big Al?
Doing awesome. Good to have you back.
Thanks a lot. So yeah, my name's Dylan Lemasters. Currently Command Sergeant Major of the garrison at Redstone Arsenal. Did 21 years in the 160th SOAR, various leadership positions. Obviously, I started there as a private and left as a Command Sergeant Major. Very tactically oriented. I was a MH60 Kilo crew chief starting out, and then transitioned to MH60 Mike. And then my last job coming out of the 160th was the Command Sergeant Major for 4th Battalion 160th SOAR.
Awesome.
So that's really my history.
Well, that's a very, very colored pass. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us here today. Next, we got Mr. Clint Underwood. Clint's he's a fellow compadre of mine over at Fall In. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself there, boss?
Hey, first off, thanks for having me, Al. I finally make one of Big Al's Fall In podcast, so this is a real privilege for me. Thanks, man. But a short story, I started out in the SEAL teams in the Navy, graduated college and went in the Army to fly helicopters, went over to Delta Company with Dylan, where he trained me up on how to fly Kilo models. And we were in Delta Company together there for a short time. Then we actually worked together again a little later in our careers before he
Yes, sir.
to be a sergeant major. So it's a privilege to be here. Good to see everybody again. And now currently I run operations for Big Al and team at Fallen Veterans. So thanks for having me.
And last but not least, Dr. Tim Murphy, and been really excited about the opportunity to get to talk to you, sir, because not only are we going to pick your brain, but I think you're probably going to pick ours. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Roger that. Great to be with you, Al and Dylan and Clint. Tim Murphy, a psychologist by training and by trade currently. Currently, I'm going to work backwards. Currently, I run a program called Fortis. Fortis is the Latin word for strong. You're familiar with Semper Fi, which is the Marines, always faithful. In the Navy, we're Semper Fortis, always strong. So the program I have is called Fortis, and provide counseling and clinical care for veterans and first responders dealing with whatever the concerns they have. It could be PTSD, PTS, trauma, tragedy in their lives, depression, anxiety. And I work along with a guy who's a former Pittsburgh Steeler who is a National Guard. Well, he was in the Steelers, John Kolb, and so he handles the fitness and nutrition and outdoor challenges parts of our program. So it's a pretty cool program. Back from that, I was in the Navy, Navy Reserve for 8 years, and there I worked at, it started out to be called Bethesda Naval Hospital, and then it became Walter Reed National Military Medical Center at Bethesda, because there weren't enough initials to really confuse people to begin with, I think. So it all got together. There I had really the distinct privilege of working on the only inpatient unit in the entire Department of Defense, which treated TBI and PTSD, moderate to severe TBI. I'd like to say I'm no hero, but I got to work with them in the wounds of war. So I continue that now too, because although the war is long gone, the memories are still there for many people, and I like to help people get their lives back together. So that's what drives me. And also, don't hold it against me, but I served in politics a couple of times as state senator, as a U.S. congressman, which actually motivated me in part to run, to enlist, to be commissioned in the Navy, because I thought, well, if I'm voting to send people to war and I have a skill set they need, I ought to stand up and offer that. So I juggled those two jobs together and wrote a book, which is behind me on the right, called The Christ Cure. It's a biblical and psychological approach to dealing with trauma and PTSD. Which came out a few months ago, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
We're talking about let's just dive right in, because obviously there's a book here, and it's right behind you. So how does that correlate? How did you get so involved in this, and what is it that we all need to know that we just don't?
Yeah, so the reason I wrote that book is, we've all had our own traumas in life, and big and small. Although I've always noticed among people who have trauma, they kind of say, "Well, yours is bigger than mine, so I have no right to feel bad about it." We can always find someone who find someone missing a hand, find someone's missing an arm, find someone's missing one eye, find someone else is missing two. Have our life devastated? Well, this person died, and there's this. There's one-upsmanship, but there's also one-downmanship, that I'm not as bad as you, so therefore I have no right to feel bad. And but the fact is, whatever that trauma, it could be a military thing, it could be a life thing, it could be a financial disaster, a sudden divorce, broken relationship, family member with a fatal diagnosis, whatever it is, those can affect us deeply. And going through my own things, I really began to reflect a lot more. I better find some other truths in this and what I do, because I've been doing this as a psychologist for a long time. And quite frankly, just dealing with counseling can be helpful for many people. Just talking among peers, other veterans, can be helpful. That venting, you think of the Roman legions when they were walking back to Rome, they had days and weeks they could talk. Soldiers after World War II had a lot of downtime in Germany and in the Pacific, or coming back on ships to talk with each other. But there's something else. People who have some spiritual religious affiliation, attend church, have a much better rate of improvement, a much better prognosis for depression, for anxiety, lower suicide rate, more intact marriage and relationships, more of a resolution of PTSD. About 2 or 3 years out of a diagnosis with the VA, about 2/3 of people still maintain that diagnosis. So I'm studying this thing and says, what is it about this? Because in biblical characters, there's so many people whose lives just were awful. And one that I really tracked was the life of the Apostle Paul. Now, let me name a few traumas. Tell me if this equals. So here's this guy that used to hunt down people who were drifting away from the Jewish principles. And so there were these Christians. And say he would find them, he would prosecute them, persecute them, execute them. And those traits alone can be a struggle for someone. At one point, he's blind, he switches religion. People used to trust him, no longer do. People don't trust him, don't know what to do. He was beaten 5 times, given 39 lashes 5 times, bitten by a poisonous snake, shipwrecked at sea, floated around a day and a half in a piece of wood, robbed, all these things. And so I asked this question, why wasn't he overwhelmed? I mean, any one of those could have broken someone, and he wasn't. So I began to ask the question, well, someone must have written something about him, and nobody had, to make a long story short. So I wrote this book, which takes biblical principles, biblical stories, but also a number of military stories and everyday life stories of people who faced trauma, but they came back stronger. And I weave into those a lot of psychological principles. And the book is really written as a reader-friendly book. I call it a handbook for the broken and those who love them. It's written as a guide, so that people can use it. Say, how do we get through these issues? What do we have to explore? And that's what I came up with. So it's the years of working with people in the military. Continuing now, I find this is a helpful outline to help people come to terms with some things to help them heal.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I understand when I transitioned, there was like really there was no assistance to be had.
Well, I will
Yeah, and
say,
that's what happens with a lot of people. You're on your own.
oh, Doc, I was
Go
going to
ahead,
say,
Clint.
I read the Christ Cure. Doc, I can't even remember how we bumped into each other. I think I sought you out on LinkedIn because I read one of your articles.
LinkedIn, yeah.
But I read the book out of curiosity, because here we are in Fall In, seeking information, products, and services to bring value to veterans' lives at the point of need, right? Put them within 3 clicks of the answer to what they're looking for. And so I saw Doc and I read his book, and here was my mentality. And this probably sounds familiar to Dr. Murphy. I was reading it to find a tool to help others. But I'll say this is what happened to me personally when I read the book. One, Dr. Murphy comes in with a vulnerability and a honesty that very quickly disarmed me. Like, I understand this guy. He is a man's man and understands what I'm going through. Like, that's what I felt within the first 12 pages of the book. And then as I continued on, I don't know how he did it, but he built trust with me as an author like that. And I picked up the tools, and I was thinking of myself introspectively instead of, hey, what can I use here to help other people? And it was just a really great journey for me, Doc. I know I've told you that before on the phone, but I just want to say I really enjoyed it. For those who think they need a tool out there, I would encourage you to read it.
And just for
Well,
everyone's situational awareness, that Dr. Murphy's book, The Christ Cure, is available in the Fallen store.
Or
yeah, and
Amazon.
Oh, yeah, or Amazon.
I'd
Yeah,
like to hop
Amazon.
in too, because I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, right? So, for me, really it came down to purpose, identity, and hope. And a lot of guys feel, to your point of, being worse off or better off, or really that individual or me as an individual comparing myself to other people is a struggle by itself, because a lot of people already feel isolated, right? So if you feel isolated, and then now not only are you trying to overcome your own challenges, you're comparing yourself to other people, it makes the situation worse,
Oh,
as
yeah.
opposed to reaching out to those people in the first place to help them or have the conversation. And I think like, as far as the stats are concerned, people do better because Christ brings hope just by itself, right?
Mhm.
And it gives, if you follow his path, it gives you a sense of purpose and identity. Because a lot of us were very driven. So once you lose those things, depression and other things happen very quickly.
Yeah. Oh, Dylan, I love what you said about comparing yourself to others, because how easy is it today with the tools we have at our fingertips to look at the facade, which is everybody else's life, which is not true. It is the best version of what they want to present, right? And then hold our inequities that we know very familiar and personally up against that. You can't do it. It will crush you, right? So back to your point, Dylan, like it takes personal connection. It takes buddy connection. Like Dylan and some of the team he's put together, like they are physically going face to face and checking in on guys just because they're thinking about it. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dylan. Like comparison with what you think other people are doing is a dangerous thing.
That isolation is an important term you threw out there too, Dylan, because um, isolation is not healthy at all. And yet we go towards it because we think several things. One, I'm so miserable with my life, I just don't want to face anything. I don't want anybody to even say, hi, how are you? We people can pretend with lots of people and say all the nice things or pretend they're there, but still be absolutely empty and vacant and just have some cute things to say. Um, but that isolation prevents us from the very important social connection which we need. And we feel such things as I'm the worst human being. No one else has been as bad as me. There's nobody who can help me. And then there's all these guilt trips that go through our head, or shame trips as they are. And one of them is I don't want to get better, because if I get better, then that means in the past, when I wasn't so good and my marriage broke up, my relationships broke up, I lost my job, I did all those things. If I get better now, that means I could have got better before. And if I could have got better before, then I didn't have to cause all these problems. So I don't want to get better because that makes me feel worse. And all these incredible head games we do. So by isolating, we think I don't have to confront anything. I'll just be out there and avoid it. And all that does is make it worse. But the great thing about a relationship with the Lord is when you realize, you know what, you never were alone. And as much as you want to lie to yourself, he always knew, and you always knew. And the denial won't work. So it is the great equalizer and the great brotherhood, sisterhood have come together and say, you've always got someone, never left you. You may have left, but always been there. And we need that part of our camaraderie, not to be alienated, but to be part of something whole. All there.
That's super
That's,
powerful too.
as I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you talk, Dr. Murphy, and I said you were going to pick our brains as well as we pick yours, and I'm thinking, man, he's saying everything that I went through. I mean, because I was feeling the exact way, especially for me when I transitioned. I mean, I went from going 90 to nothing to just like I was out the door in an afternoon. I mean, and then now what? Now you got to figure out what you're gonna wear. Because my clothes aren't picked out for me every day. I actually had to try to find my new identity. And one thing I tell people was like when I was 18, it's like if you take your carry-on bag, I had all of my identity in my carry-on bag. And right before I got on the plane, they were like, "Hey, we have to check that." Well, I lost that innocence and I never was able to find that dude back again, And so, literally once I retired, now I'm trying to figure out who I really am as even a civilian, just a lot to.
It's interesting you talk about the transition. I know at Bethesda, there's a giant commissary and a giant exchange. I mean, it's a big department store, right? And you've seen these on big bases and, the uniform shop. I always like those. But the uniform shop, there's oftentimes even pictures, like this is how you're supposed to look. Every branch, and here's how you're supposed to dress. And I love that. All these very exact details. And you can always look it up online, whatever. But I was once in the clothing, the men's department clothing at the exchange at Bethesda. And there was a sailor standing there, probably in his mid-20s, and I said, "You look perplexed." And he says, "Sir, I'm trying to figure out what to wear." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm leaving the Navy, and I haven't worn this stuff in a long time, and I got to pick out some dress clothes." And I said, "Here, I'll help you out." And so I said, "Don't be embarrassed that a commander's helping you out here." He says, "Sir, I appreciate it because I never wore this stuff. I don't even know how to tie a tie. How do I pick one out?" But that little symbol is important. Yeah, even how to pack your clothes, all those things that we take. And so it's a question I have for you all. And although Dylan, you're not out yet, it's still there. But the question becomes, when you left the service, what was your biggest surprise? Now, Clint, I think were you reserved for a while too? So you had a transition period there? No, you were. Yeah. Okay. So what was your biggest surprise when you left of something like, well, I'm a big boy, but I don't know how to do this? You just named one of them, Al. Was there something for you, Clint?
I think they still happen every day, Doc.
Fair
I'll
enough.
tell you, look, in the military, here was a shocker for me. In the military, we only take, and in the units we were in, honestly, like we were really lucky to be under some of the most phenomenal leadership in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, we're all kind of like-minded about being pretty vigilant about the mission. So when it came to our personal lives, we took minimum amount of time to square it away and then got back to the mission. So when it came to marriages, we bought a new dog, Christmases, we celebrated like, the best of the best at birthday parties and everybody. And we turned on this personality and then we turned that off, went right back to work. Now, after I retired, there's a couple events that have happened, namely most recently, my father passed away. Well, I have time now to attend to other people that were affected by that event, like my mother and my brothers and those people. Before it was, hey, I got another deployment coming up. I got to go on a training trip and pack my bags. Now you have to sit in life with the people around you and your family longer and help them more with their sorrow or their joy or whatever. Dylan, me and we never had that privilege before. It was, hey, happy birthday, I'm going back. Right.
So were you prepared? Were there any skill sets you picked up from the military? Did you have to really just take the training wheels off and figure it out by yourself of how to help with grieving?
No, it's really difficult. Like what I think we all three, or probably you too, are really professionals at formality. We can orchestrate a funeral and speak and give all the accolades and give an obituary and speak on the individual's legacy, and people are like, wow, we really appreciate his dad. What we never had the privilege to do is to hang around and tend to the wounds of our families, which linger and need fatherhood and leadership, mentorship.
So I'm going to hit on that when you're done too.
Oh yeah. So when you do that for your family, it takes a little bit more than the composed leader and a little bit of temporary formality. It takes commitment. It takes compassion, which is understanding how they feel, which means you start to feel that way and experience it with them. And you know,
Hmm.
that's a new region of life for people that go back to their families after the military.
Yeah. What
So like, okay, go ahead,
no, I said,
Al.
what would you want to add?
Yeah, so like to that point, right? So obviously I'm still in, I haven't transitioned, so I can't really address that question directly. But you know what I'd say from the world that I lived in is you have a singular focus on the mission, like Clint already hit on, but it also enables you to kind of drop off from the rest of the world, right? The challenges of the rest of the world, because you're so focused on the mission that it's almost selfish in a lot of ways because you're not dealing with all those things. So it's something I've had to learn just transitioning um, out of the regiment into a garrison life, if you will, is dealing with those things. Like, hey,
It's
family has issues, and actually like opening up my aperture to see the world for what it is, not my singular focus of mission, 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 mission.
so that's doesn't that literally suck when you cannot use the excuse of fighting a war? You have to deal with life. I'd much rather be fighting a war than have to deal with what, man, I need those problems. I don't need
Hmm.
these problems. Another thing that I realized too, and it really just kind of nobody cares. That was huge because, like, here I am, it's the weekend, buddy, and I'm checking out, and I could head north, south, east, west. I'm free, and I don't have to check in. Nobody cares. That's a big one because before, if I was going 50 miles from the house, I had to let a buddy know or somebody know. But now I can move freely about the country. I can get on an airplane. I can go to Europe. Nobody cares. That was another big one.
Yeah, I love
Hmm.
what you just said, Dylan, about there's a self, there is, and uh, you just the way you said it was great, but it's so complex, but it's easy for a vigilant, mission focused operator to feel selfish, like I'm not doing enough for my family. I'm not present enough for my kids. But at the same time, I can't afford not to be focused, right? If I show up at
Absolutely.
work and my boys see I ain't focused, I'm not going to be in the unit very long, right? So, with
Hmm.
that, Dylan, like you said, it's easy to feel like, man, I could be doing more, right? And when you retire, you're like, okay, here's your opportunity to do more. And you feel like, well, I'm going to hold myself to the same standards and do everything great when it's really hard. The
Oh yeah,
relationships, raising kids is
Yeah, it's
really
not
hard.
even. It's not realistic.
Yeah.
yeah. It goes
Yeah.
back to like expectation management, right? So like, you know, in my mind, even just transitioning here, right? In my mind, I'm like, boom, I'm on the same track. I know how to operate. Come in, have a great time with the family, leave. Now that I'm with them all the time, I've had to reduce my expectations because they're just not
Hmm.
realistic. So it goes back to the focus and your perception of what you think you need to do, right? And the reality is you just need to slow down and be intentional on how you engage your family.
So taking those things and looking how some people can be more or less prone to post-traumatic stress, 70% of the population will face some major trauma in their life that's life-threatening to them or they're witness to or someone close to them, some major trauma. Of those, about 20% will have some prolonged symptoms, but they get better over time. And others will have full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder with the debilitating things of nightmares, sleep problems, broken relationships, avoidance, triggers that bring back flashbacks, all those things that can be devastating. Over time, many of those things improve, talking and they improve. But what's interesting is one of the things that affects those who are in the military and first responders, because they also have a regimented life, is when you all talked about this. When we have that regimentation, we can always fall back in. A lot of things may change. Now, one of the things I notice I still do when I put my shoes down, I still line them up. I still put the laces inside the shoe. Oh, that was a Navy thing. I don't know if y'all had that too, but I had those things. And a certain way I hang my shirt, I do that same thing. In a certain way, check the gig line on my buttons and my belt. All this, got to do all those things. It's just those little things that remind me that there is um, some rules, some standards to adhere to. Religion also gives us that. It gives us a truth to adhere to. But when we don't, when we lose those kind of questions, say, I don't have this grounding anymore. And then we add to that the feelings like, particularly if it's a military trauma, says, man, these things happened and should have done more. I wish I could. I feel guilty. Something better didn't happen. It's my fault, even when it's not our fault. I wish I had known. And we pile those things on, but we don't have those things to go back to. I don't have a mission to go back to. I don't have back to work. Now we have all this downtime. And what we do is we, if I can say these 3 stages of trauma, I ask you guys to go through that. First stage, I call this trauma in triplicate. The first stage is the actual event that occurred. Whatever that occurred, most head injuries and major traumas occur in garrison and in training. I mean, now you see these accidents occurring. They're not occurring in war. In fact, even during the war, about 80% of head injuries occurred in training. But all right, let's take that, the first one. So whatever that event is that we felt our life was threatened at high risk, or maybe you're doing things, you get the Dear John letter, your life is a wreck. Okay, that's one. But once that event is over, it's over. It's done. You cannot unset the. There it is. But we as humans have this ability to have memory. And so here's the stage, part 2 of trauma. And that is we get caught up in the memory loop over and over and over and over and over and over. And we keep playing that. It's sort of like, when you watch an NFL game and they've got to show you whether or not it was a touchdown or first down by a quarter inch or hair. So much so you're tired looking at it, but you're not done yet because ESPN is now going to do a 5-hour special on videotape angles from every side. But we do the same thing in their head. But what we do is our videotape replay is not accurate. We add to it, we subtract from it, we add our opinions, our impressions. And as long as that's bounced around my head, it gets distorted. But it also reinforces it because when the initial event happened, our brain, particularly the amygdala, had the fight, flight, reaction triggered. It rushed all the hormones through our body, which is a real reaction to what it is. During the our amygdala, very powerful, can take over our body, get us ready for a fight. Very important, has helped us survive since Cro-Magnon man and saber-tooth tigers. But it's really dumb because it doesn't know the difference between what's happening now and what happened years ago or yesterday. And so I say it's kind of like a smoke detector. Important, powerful, but really dumb because a smoke detector in your house can't tell the difference between your house is on fire versus grandma just blew out 80 birthday candles. It doesn't know. But our mind keeps getting pumped up and we react. But we have to remind ourselves, oh, whoa, it's only a memory. It's not happening anymore. But we say, yeah, but I feel guilty. I feel terrible. Okay, I got that, but it's not happening. But then there's a third part where we really drive ourselves crazy. And that is we have a reaction to our reaction. So I may say, gee, I've been counseling, I've been getting help for this, taking some medication, doing these things. I think I'm okay. But all of a sudden I have a panic attack or anxiety, or I'm in this situation, I'm stressed again. And then we do this reaction. Oh my gosh, I'm having this problem. I thought I was over it. Oh, I'm not. If I'm not, maybe I'm never going to get better. Maybe I'm a disaster. Oh my gosh, this is getting terrible. Maybe I can't even deserve to live. And we go on and on. And it's one of those times you want someone to blow the whistle and say, time out. Take a couple of deep breaths. It's not happening anymore. You're going to be okay. You're loved and cared for. You don't have to feel that. So those are the things that keep us going, that taking the things y'all said about losing those deployments, the regimen and lifestyle, as much as we hated it sometimes, 90% boredom, 10% terror, it still gave us something to fall back on. So we have all this time on our own to reflect. That's how we drive ourselves into this anxious position then with our trauma.
Hey, Dylan. Listening to Doc Murphy, I was just thinking about you all the time. Like, do you mind sharing like what that was like for you when you experienced like some of that, and then you actually talked to somebody and just kind of walk through that a little bit?
Yeah. All right. So hitting on just panic attacks, specifically, right? So, so very vivid memory. So for me, it happened January 23rd, 2015. 09:30 in the morning, right? I was at a command and staff, wonderful day. I was with my friends, with my teammates. We were joking, laughing. There's 2 booms or whatever, and I went into a full-on panic attack. I ended up having to walk out of the meeting. I just got up, walked out. I was walking back and forth in front of the command and staff, trying to calm down, trying to catch my breath, because like immediately my heart rate spiked. Like my fight or flight response was obviously basically in between, but I was all in, right? So had the adrenaline dump and all that stuff. And, I tried to, breathe through it and use all the coping techniques that I knew up until that point. And I just couldn't calm down. So I ended up going to the restroom, splashing water on my face, trying to breathe. I sat down. So at a certain point, I'm like, hey, maybe I'm having a heart attack, right? So I walked over to the aid station, and I didn't go in initially. I walked back and forth in front of the aid station a few times, still trying to like calm myself down, but I still couldn't calm down. And at that point, it felt like it was like 40 minutes, right? And really, it was probably only 10. So I walked in the aid station. They tried to take my number. I was like, nope, I'm having a heart attack or a panic attack, and went straight into the OR, if you will. And then, the medics and the whole team came, descended on me. So, obviously my blood pressure, heart rate were through the roof, all that type of stuff. And quite frankly, once I calmed down, I was exhausted. It was like I ran a marathon, right? And then John Ross came, took me home that day. I made it to the couch. And basically, after that point, for me, the couch became the safe space, right? So it was everything I could do to get through a day, get back to the couch, and boom, I'm back in my safe space. I can be safe. And I did that for a long time, right? And so, just like God gives you a choice, at a certain point, I had to make a choice. And my wife helped me, and some other things happened that kind of forced me to make that choice. And I'm condensing some of this stuff. But I made a choice. I got on head drugs and stuff like that to try to overcome some of the challenges. But I was catastrophizing, right? I was always waiting for the next thing. And it was a challenge. I mean, I was shutting down. Everybody thought that I was good, like everybody, except for my family. And I knew I wasn't good. And there were some days I was almost sucking my thumb under the frickin', the computer in my office, right? So anyway, I got on the head drugs. I didn't feel like myself. One day I was driving home, and I've always had faith in God and stuff. I was driving home, and I was just like, I can't live this way anymore, and made a choice right then, like with God and myself, like I'm not doing this anymore. Next day, I came off the SRI that I was on, which is do not recommend that to anybody. Never come off that cold turkey. Bad idea. So anyway, from that day forward, I changed how I approached it. And it was baby steps, and it took a long time, but every day I got another step further, right? And then I got to a point of where I could mitigate that and built my own coping mechanisms. And it's been quite a while since I've had a panic attack, right? So that's kind of it in a nutshell, to condense it, but it's way more in depth than that, a lot more challenges.
But you were, Dylan, throughout the process, you were talking to folks, right? And you were speaking out. And
Yeah, I was. The issue is it goes back to perspective, right, and perception. Because when you talk to somebody about this stuff, sometimes they just don't know what they don't know, right? Or you can't convey it, you can't communicate it. So it's hard. But yes, I was talking to people, and that helped me tremendously. And in some cases, they're going through the same things that I was, but they weren't at a place in their walk in life to talk about it.
Yeah, the key is right there. What you're saying is being able to talk to the right people. I mean, right now, because I'm on all of the head drugs that you're talking about that you got off of, but there's still only one person in that whole chain that I truly trust to talk to, and I still don't talk to that person about everything. You know what I mean? I still keep So 75% just gotta be, it's still right here inside me. So I totally
So,
understand what you're saying.
but Al, look at this. If you go to a doctor, and actually, most people are not honest with their doctor, oddly enough, and you have your checkup, and he says, "Is there anything else you want to tell me about?" Says, "No, I'm good." Then you walk out and says, "Man, I think I've got cancer." Well, why do you think you have? But I never told the doctor about this. So I'm too embarrassed. So maybe I'm going to die in the next couple of weeks. That's not an uncommon thing that people do. I'm going to tell you what I call the killer D's. These are the 12 things we do to keep ourselves confronting it. Al, you're mentioning some, Clint. I've done this. Dylan, you have. First of all, is denial. We deny it exists. There's nothing wrong with me. I like to see that scene from Star Wars, the very first Star Wars, where Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "These aren't the drones you're looking for. Just go
Right.
ahead and go." There's nothing wrong. Second one is dismissive. I'll change when there really is a problem, or we dismiss. No one's going to really help me. I'm not going to any shrink, or whatever that is. My doctor's no good. Can't trust the VA. Another one is defiance. We suspect there's a problem, but we're not going to take action. Kind of a passive aggressive move against another person. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of me changing, or whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do the opposite. Or if my behavior makes this person miserable, good. Here's another one: deception. We lie to ourselves, and we lie to other people about the source of the problem. That's what you just said, Al. And I've done this too. And this can be everything from, I don't have PTSD. I'm just tired. I'm not an alcoholic. I just have a couple of drinks. Or other people have it worse. Here's another one: despair. It's like a building collapses on ourselves with depression. I'm stuck. My life is pointless. I'm always going to fail. So why should I try? This is unsolvable. I'm worthless. We get into this funk of terrible things we say to ourselves, catastrophizing. Here's the next one: distract. I'm too busy, or I'm going to go ride my motorcycle and go 150 miles an hour, or my next deployment, can't do anything, goodbye. We distract ourselves and we get back into our work mode so we don't have to think about it. We don't have to feel it until one day it hits us. Number 7, drugs. We self-medicate with alcohol, street drugs, prescription drugs, binge eating, alcohol, candy, spending, adrenaline, whatever it is, we use drugs. Adrenaline rush is a drug. Number 8, we deflect. It's not me, it's you. I would be okay if it wasn't for you. You're the one that needs to change, not me. It all goes this. And as you know, they say crap flows downhill, but in the military it also flows uphill sometimes too,
Yep.
right? Command sergeant majors, you get a lot of it from the enlisted. And then you say, was the lieutenant or the captain or whatever it gave it. So we have that deflection. Discontent. This is where sad becomes mad. We get agitated, angry. We lash at others. We blame them. You see a lot of this. The angry person, the short-tempered person. Just saw that the VA once again is, if you have a dishonorable discharge for behavior reasons, please go back to the VA and ask them to review that, because it may be, if it's behavior reasons, they apparently overturned 75% of those if they showed that there's some other psychological issues in the military to deal with. That's discontent. The next one, this gets a little more into struggles and psychological problems called detach, where you feel, I'm emotionally numb, I'm not really here. If any of you have ever been in a situation where you feel like a walking zombie, I'm watching this on a movie, I'm not really here, that's a pretty serious level. The 11th one is just say, I'm done. You prematurely claim it's all over, no need to work anymore, won't happen again, don't worry about it, I'm fixed, but I'm going to permanently drive with this spare tire. But I'm done. And the 12th one is this, and that's death. It's the actual suicide. I can't do this anymore. And in some cases, it's the walking dead. But all those things, it turns out, don't work. And what we do, the best thing to do is what you've all done, and at some point confront it and say, I can't get better if I don't do this. And what we find out is putting it into words, we make that more scary than enemy fire. You know, I can handle 1,000 Al Qaeda running at me with their guns and their sabers, but I can't handle the thoughts in my own mind, and that's where we have to do with courage. And it's okay to say I'm scared of that stuff,
Yeah,
but not to
it's
give into these deeds.
it's courageous. No, Doc, that was great. You were a little
Yeah,
harsh
that's
on
good.
you were a little harsh on binge eating. Like I'm a fan of binge eating.
Yeah.
But so I need to look closely at that for myself, because I can eat an entire pizza by myself.
But
What I want to say is that, to your point, Doc, confronting our own thoughts. Like, I've watched Dylan do this, and I don't want to speak for you, Dylan, but from an outsider's perspective, he not only confronted them and asked for people's help, but when he got them together, he shared them with people. And what I've seen from the outside is people flocking to him, wanting to hear, and then sharing with him their story. Like, man, me too, right? And in that connection, you see a power that, well, if he can confront this and actually get that catharsis of talking with someone, which is a healing point, maybe I can have the courage to do that too. And I see people stepping into the ring with Dylan and his close comrades and actually volunteering to share their stories as a moment of, cathartic healing and just finding closure, frankly. So
I love that.
Dylan, kudos for doing that. But yeah, Doc, I hear you loud and clear. So
it got to the point where it was kind of uncomfortable because I felt like you were just looking at me, talking directly to me. But unlike Dylan, when I retired, I kind of, I went through a divorce. I got cancer. I lost my job. All of that happened within 4 years. But I kept all of mine internalized. I mean, I did not share with anybody. You know what I mean? It was my battle. It was my struggle, and that's just the way it was. So I applaud people that could go out there and can share it. Sometimes it's just not that easy.
So
it isn't
I'll
easy.
hit on that. It 100% is not. So excellent points, Doc. Excellent points, Clint. And Big Al, you probably went through this. You know what I mean? So, I mean, really, to be honest, I was absolutely detached, right? I mean, I was 100%. And
yeah, I still am.
yeah.
This podcast is really what pulls me out to make me kind of like talk to people.
Yes.
Well, and the thing is, like, you have to be vulnerable to, like, help yourself and help others at the same time, right? So, like, I didn't accidentally get here. Like, I think everything happens for a reason. And to the point of being detached, like, I literally was on a couch for a year, essentially. My son's best friend had been coming to our house for a whole year. And I didn't even know who that kid was. I mean, I was detached. But things happen, like challenges happen in my life that I had to overcome. And like, to me, God kind of showed me a different way to look at it, right? Or forced me to, or put me through a series of trials or challenges that forced me to pick a way, to choose, like, hey, I can go down the alcohol road, which for me, I stayed away from because my family was always alcoholics, right? Not all of my family, but some of my family. So I was like, alcohol is not really an option. So my outlet was to help people. And that was the best way I could see, like, going forward. So that's how I got on the path that I'm on, if you will. And I just try to be as honest as I can.
That's a great way of helping people. When you help people, what did that do with your own fears and your own memories as you helped them? Did you use that as a mechanism to hide your own fears and worries, or did that help you be less fearful of your own?
Well, so initially, it was just kind of more about telling my story, right, to connect with people. And something my wife actually brought up was like, I told my story, and she's like, Dylan, it sounds like it's easy. You know what I mean? And I was like, holy cow, you're right. Because I'd tell a story and it's like, all right, I'm compressing like 8 years worth of stuff into 5 minutes and hitting the high points. So it comes off very easy, but the reality is super hard, right? So what I had to do is kind of take a step back and realize, like, that's when I realized that everybody's at a different point in their walk in life, right? And I had to force myself to listen more and speak less, to fully understand their problem and offer not a solution, but like a perspective so they can make a choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And in that, this relates to what you said too, Big L. You're unique just like everybody else. And you're like everybody else in your uniqueness. We all go through these things. as you're saying these things, I want to show you something because, in the military, we love patches. And I want to show you the patch that I designed. So when I do a workshop for people, hint, hint, you want me to come down there, just let me know. You get a number of people together. We'll do this. I'll show you. I have like a few hour, 1 day or 1 hour workshop. I do this stuff. We go through things in the book.
I've got 100 kids.
At the end,
you're welcome here anytime.
Okay. Just give me a tent or a sleeping bag in your backyard. So, but you need a patch for identity, right? And you have that, whatever it is. And as soon as people see this, oh, I know what that means. You're with this unit or that unit, right? This is the patch that I designed. Let me describe that. It's if I can hold it up there, nice. So it's a tree that's been cut down, but it's been growing back stronger. And that tree has 4 roots, and I don't hold it steady. In the biblical way, that's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health that feeds that tree. But it's cut down, but it's growing back upward, defiant, saying, you're not going to kill me. I'm going to come back. Now, it turns out that this forms the Greek letter psi, like in psychiatry, psychology. Little inside joke. And the other thing is those leaves on there in the Navy, Medical Corps, Medical Service Corps, et cetera, is symbolized by that oak leaf, a different kind of leaf than one of rank. And because I want people to have a patch to identify as, way, I've been through something that's aimed towards healing. And it is something to remember that biblically, Job talks about when he's complaining, he says, at least there's hope for a tree. So even though it's cut down, at the first sign of moisture, it starts to grow back again. Another great military metaphor for this is there's a place called Monte Cassino in Italy, which something like 4 or 5 times it's been destroyed by barbarians, by, I don't know, whoever else came through there. When they took over things in Rome and Italy, World War II, it was bombed to rubble because they thought there was people holed up in there, but the Germans were holed up in there. But each time it got built back better and stronger. And there is a saying they have for theirs. They also have a different image of a tree, but I think it's but basically the Latin phrase translates to "cut me down, I grow back stronger." And so the same thing happens biblically when Jesus says you got to prune the tree, or you're not going to have a very good fruit on it. You got to get cut back. And if we look upon those things we go through as I'm not being destroyed. I'm being pruned. I'm being focused. Okay, these doors close, and I can either sit back and do what I call the arrogance of self-pity, or I can move forward. And this is where, if you're isolated, you don't have it. But we all should find someone who's able to say to us, "Come on, let's do this together." And if we're getting too caught up in things, that you can't go down that road. You can't go down. Let's do this together. Come on. Yeah, it's going to suck. But if we don't do that, and sometimes you need a friend to actually give you a kick in the rear and say, you can't do that. Or, drop the F-bomb on us. You're not going to do that. And when I say that, it's sort of like people are hesitant, like, I don't know, should I really do that? And I think fellow veterans can do that for each other. Maybe someone can't. It's sort of like if you saw someone, you're in a battlefield and their eyes were burned, they couldn't see, and they get out and they start walking towards a minefield. Would you say, hey, come on back, pretty please? Don't do that. Come sit down. Let me give you some ice cream. You'd grab them and says, no, you can't do that. Now, I'm not saying we have to be rough on everybody, but sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is just to reach out again and again and say, no, you can't go down that road. It's not true. You can get better. And so as each of you tell your story, it's valuable for other people to hear that, oh, you mean you confronted it and you're okay? Yeah, I'm not 100% okay, but I'm getting better and I'm not backing down. And that's a fight you can all win.
Yeah, Step into the good fight every day. It's every day. It's not over tomorrow. We got to step back into it.
Well, and I think another critical point is like you don't have to do it alone, right? So like Big Al mentioned it earlier, is like he got out and he felt alone, right? So like that when you're in a very strong team that's interconnected and you're with these guys and your team like almost 24/7, then all of a sudden you get out and you're by yourself. That's a huge challenge. So a part of getting better is like staying connected with them, but it's a two-way street, right? Because they may not know that you're struggling. So that's a tough thing because like guys self-isolate, right? When they don't have to. And you hit on it, Doc, like guys just self-isolate. It's like, hey, you're not in this alone and you don't have to do it alone. We're here. We have your back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest things in the whole creation of this is because, you know, I was versed with the system. I knew how it worked. I was the first sergeant, so I kind of knew how to navigate a lot of these channels. Well, here I was on the other side of this trying to navigate it, and man, I'm just saying, as I went through and start checking on these programs and started trying to do this, none of it worked. And so I said, man, that's bullcrap. Because if I know how to do it, then what's that dude who only served 4 years? What's he going to go through when he tries to do the same thing? You know, he doesn't understand how the whole system even works. So that's the reason why we kind of created Fall In. And I'll say this too with that. It's, you know, cancer saved my life because that was the one thing that happened that kind of took my focus off of what I was dealing with inside and kind of gave me a new focus to fight. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is something that is like my own personal war. And yeah, we just gotta get more people comfortable with talking about it.
Hey, so let me ask you this, because you hit a critical thing. Although this is kind of bad to say, do you think like the cancer gave you purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, their wake-up call. Clint, you were going to say something?
Oh, I did. That quote from Al was just priceless. Your own personal
Beautiful.
war.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like that
Yeah.
is real, right? Like you have you got to redefine your focus. You have got to find a new mission. You got to turn that vigilance to something. And if you can't, if you don't have good people, good spirituality, good, you know, community around you, it's really easy to get focused on negative aspects of your life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I love that, Al. Your own personal war. Like everybody's
Yeah.
Good.
fighting one. You don't have to fight it alone, right? Like your brothers will step up and step in.
Well,
Good
Dr.
takeaway
Murphy.
message for the day. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and your tree patch, right? So like for the longest
I
time,
love tree patch.
yeah. You know, we just focus too much on like the physical portion of things, right? We're like, hey, work out, just work out more, you'll be okay, or whatever it is. And the reality is like it's a holistic approach. There's not one thing that's going to fix any of this stuff. So you have to have a holistic approach, and you have to get rid of your own dead weight. Like you have to prune the things that aren't required to be carried anymore.
Yeah, and sometimes
you're
those
just
things can
dragging
be
it.
people.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, you have to really got to assess yourself and make those tough choices.
Yeah, if you're around top people. You know, in the Bible, Paul talks about the body as one, and you can't function with only one part. It's interesting. When I was in Corinth, in Greece, they have this display there that the Greek doctors at the time, when they were diagnosing things, they'd actually make models of someone's hand or their arm or leg and things like that to show here's a healthy arm and here's a not healthy arm. And you wonder if him looking at those, he got this whole idea is you can't just diagnose this from the part, but those parts of mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual that I have here as the roots of the patch. If only one of those is fed, that tree's not going to make it. So if you think of your appendages, let's say one arm is mental, one arm's physical, one's emotional, one's spiritual, your legs too. You can't just work out with one arm and expect your whole body to be in shape. You got to do all those. And yeah, you're right. We said, okay, I'm just going to hit the O course, the PT, do a little more of that. If you're working the other parts, you can do that too. But boy, it's tough to just try and go it alone. It just won't work. So I certainly implore people who may watch this, they don't have to have their own personal war alone. You're not in alone. That work on all those things together. I hope people do read the book because it's written a lot for, as I said, people in the military, and to get some sense of this. I should say in the book, because we've all shared a little bit of our stories, because I share personal things there too. It was a painful book to write, but a hopeful book to read, The Christ Cure. That, so people know that there's something can go through that and come out better. So.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Murphy, I really appreciate you for coming down and sharing your insight and providing knowledge. Always is a pleasure, Dylan, for you coming and sharing your story. You know, inspiration to everybody. Clint, you know, director of daily ops. I got to have this guy around every day because he's the one he's the one that keeps the fire lit. Hopefully, Dr. Murphy, we can actually, because I want to get this. I want this to gain momentum. So hopefully from this, we could actually even get you down to Huntsville here and set up maybe a men's group study where we can go through and you can tell the story in a little bit more in depth with the book.
Oh, let's make it happen. In the meantime, if people want to reach me, I've got a website, which is drtimmurphy.com. That's DRTIMMURPHY, drtimmurphy.com. Got my blogs, my podcasts, my posts there, but you can also email me through that as well. And because I know there's a lot of people hurting, a lot of people the only connection they have with someone is maybe watch this. You're not alone. There's lots of people out there want to help you.
That's a great ending message right there.
Well, hey, I'm not letting you go without putting out my public service broadcast. Hey, you can also find Dr. Tim Murphy on Fall In, right? He's got a page. His articles are on there. You can go to the shopping tab and find his book inside the Fall In store. So we're a great proponent of his. We want to, give him a shout out and push him out as much as we can. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Al, for doing this. I just want to say appreciate it.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks.
Hey,
thanks.
Thank you guys all again. Yeah, my pleasure. And hopefully we're going to do this again, and we'll do it again and again, just to kind of share more knowledge and shed more light on the subject. Once again, thank everybody for tuning in to the Fall In podcast. As always, I'm your host, Big Al, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Hey.